It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
On Thursday morning, the White House released the president's budget proposal, which calls for billions of dollars in cuts to the programs and agencies that help the most needy and vulnerable in the nation in order to add $54 billion to our already bloated military budget to build the wall that Mexico is allegedly paying for and to ramp up deportations. At the Thursday midday comedy break, more commonly known as the White House press briefing, Spicy handed things over to Budget Director Mick Mulvaney to let him try to explain the inexplicable.
First cut is the deepest. Baby, I know the first cut is the deepest.
Well, Housing and Urban Development and the Community Development Block Grants support a variety of different programs, including Meals on Wheels. So what do you say to those Americans who are ultimately losing out?
Meals on Wheels is not a federal program. It's part of that CDBGs, the block grants that we give to the states. Have been many states make the decision to use that money on Meals on Wheels. We spent $150 billion on those programs since the 1970s. The CDBGs have been identified as programs since, I believe, the second Bush administration as ones that were just not showing any results. We can't do that anymore. We can't spend money on programs just because they sound good and great. Meals on Wheels sounds great, but to take the federal money and give it to the states and say, look, we want to give you money for programs that don't work. I can't defend that anymore. We're going to spend money. We're going to spend a lot of money, but we're not going to spend it on programs that cannot show that they actually deliver the promises that we've made to people.
Meals on Wheels feeds hungry senior citizens who often don't see another human being except for the volunteer who delivers said meals, who says it doesn't work.
I'm going hungry.
After-school programs generally. They're supposed to be educational programs, right? And that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to help kids who don't get fed at home get fed so they do better in school. Guess what? There's no demonstrable evidence they're actually doing that. There's no demonstrable evidence they're actually helping results, helping kids do better in school, which is what, when we took your money from you to say, look, we're going to go spend on an after-school program, the way we justified it was, these programs are going to help these kids do better in school and get better jobs. And we can't prove that that's happening.
You know the way it goes about. It takes you in and spits you out.
The cuts to housing and urban development amount to 12% of their budget. The Department of State is second on the list of cuts, slated to have its funding slashed by 29%. Why?
It just so happens that much of the foreign aid that the president talked about in campaign, much of the money that goes to climate research, green energy, those types of things are actually in the State Department budget. So the answer to your question is that most of the cuts within the State Department try to focus directly on foreign aid. Regarding the question as to climate change, I think the president was fairly straightforward, is that we're not spending money on that anymore. We consider that to be a waste of your money to go out and do that. So that is a specific tie to his campaign.
Jim Acosta of CNN asked the question I've been thinking.
Describe this as a hard power budget, but is it also a hard-hearted budget?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think it's probably one of the most compassionate things we can do to actually
You're help the elderly.
You're
and
only
kids?
focusing on half of the equation, right? You're focusing on recipients of the money. We're trying to focus on both the recipients of the money and the folks who give us the money in the first place. And I think it's fairly compassionate to go to them and say, look, we're not going to ask you for your hard-earned money anymore. Single mom of two in Detroit. Give us your money. We're not going to do that anymore unless we can guarantee. Please let me finish. Please let me finish. Unless we can guarantee to you that that money is actually be used in a proper function. And I think that is about as compassionate as you can get.
They'll cut everything from Meals on Wheels to programs that give hungry kids the only hot meal they'll eat in a day because they want to guarantee the tax money we pay will be used in a proper function. They're cutting these programs to add $54 billion to the military budget so we can bomb the living shit out of people living on the other side of the world? In what reality is that a proper function? And finally, Irish Prime Minister Enda Kennedy was in Washington, D.C. on Thursday and delivered some pointed remarks, standing right next to President Trump.
It's fitting that we gather here each year to celebrate St. Patrick and his legacy. He too was an immigrant. And though he is, of course, the patron saint of Ireland for many people around the globe, he's also a symbol of, indeed, the patron of immigrants. Here in America, new great country, 35 million people claim Irish heritage, and the Irish have contributed to the economic, social, political political and cultural life of this great country over the last 200 years. Ireland came to America because deprived of liberty, deprived of opportunity, of safety, of even food itself, the Irish believed. And 4 decades before Lady Liberty lifted her lamp, we were the wretched refuse on the teeming shore. We believed in the shelter of America, in the compassion of America, in the opportunity of America. We came and we became Americans. We lived the words of John F. Kennedy long before he uttered them. We asked not what America could do for us, but what we could do for America, and we still do.
Let's see. 3 years, 10 months to go.
And that's today's dose of Nicole Sandler's What's News. Hear Nicole's show Tuesday through Friday from 3 to 4 Eastern at NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
I love you, Randy.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
It's St. Patty's Day, you bastards.
You know, girls, it's great to live in a democracy today.
Today.
Where freedom is everywhere.
What?
But girls, we often take this freedom for granted.
Really?
Freedom of speech.
Yes.
Freedom of thought.
What?
And freedom of action.
Yeah.
But you know, gals,
huh?
Just because a bunch of men signed that Declaration of Independence in 1776 doesn't mean that freedom was for men alone.
Oh, no?
Oh, no, you take Tom Jefferson.
Okay.
Ben Franklin.
Yeah, no.
John Hancock.
Adorbs.
There's a hell of a guy for you right there.
Absolutely.
All these men had wives.
Yes.
They probably had a few broads on the side, too.
The Upper East Side.
These women wanted freedom just as much as their men did.
Yeah.
But gals, I wonder, do we? I think it's time that we women thought about it a bit. Hell, I think it's time we did something about it.
Hell.
So come on, fellow females of the 20th century.
21st.
Be glad that you're an American.
I'm glad.
Proclaim your freedom.
Freedom.
And attention.
Oh, dear God.
Pledge allegiance.
Allegiance.
And...
The first St. Patrick's Day in a very long time where we really have a reason to drink. All right. Holy crap, man. Did you see? I bet you nobody saw this. Trump's first St. Patrick's Day, he was hosting the Irish Prime Minister. Yeah, the Prime Minister of Ireland. It was Mike Pence. It was Paul Ryan. And it was Donald Trump. And they totally embarrassed themselves and us and managed to offend the Irish. And if St. Patrick's Day was this bad, can you imagine what Cinco de Mayo is going to be like? Oh, my God. Watch this. Watch this.
Calls the waiter over and says,
listen to this accent.
"Sorry, lad, my son spilled the water." And the waiter says, "No problem, sir. I'll get you a new one." The father grabs the waiter's arm and says, "Okay, but make sure this one likes hurling." Americans, especially American Irish, are always trying to endear ourselves to the Irish. Think about it. We went from a president who plays a lot of golf to a president who owns a lot of golf courses.
Was golf created in Ireland?
And that is about the closest thing to royalty you can get in Ireland. I would like to offer a toast to what our forefathers have started and our children will continue. May the light always shine upon them.
Look at that. Where's the head? Where's the head? Look at these tweets. That's what it's supposed to look like.
That's my new friend.
Oh, this is so embarrassing. Watch this.
Great guy. And Fiola, you know, you are something very special.
My wife, Fionnuala.
I'm reminded of that proverb, and this is a good one. This is one I like. I've heard it for many, many years, and I love it.
Oh, he's such a liar.
Always remember to forget the friends that proved untrue, but never forget to remember those that have stuck by you. We know that, politically speaking.
tweets were hysterical. They were in real time. People were saying, I have never, as an Irish person, I have never ever heard that proverb in my life. And do you know why? Because it's Nigerian. Oh, snap. Oh. And what's not on that video there, and I thank the Washington Post who did the quick edit, because there's no way we could have edited that quickly and showed it to you for today. But this is the most, I mean, wow, St. Patrick's Day, and all he had to do was receive a bowl of shamrocks from the Irish Prime Minister and say thank you very much. You know, we're a nation of immigrants and we welcome you and we're so glad your people can. No, instead you have, first of all, Mike Pence started the whole little song and dance there, the little dog and pony show with the greeting of the Prime Minister of Ireland by saying top of the morning. Okay, no one says that. No one says that. Top of the morning. The Irish never, ever say that. Now, the State Department could have told Mike Pence this, because that's kind of one of the functions of the State Department, is to tell your vice president, tell your president, tell the Speaker of the House, this is Ireland, and here's, you know, if you wanted to make an Irish joke or something like this, here's areas that you can go to, here's areas you should stay away from, you don't want to offend, you don't want to, you know, but of course we don't have anybody working at the State Department anymore. Thanks, Rex Tillerson, thanks. Who's, by the way, spending St. Patrick's Day threatening to bomb the North Koreans, which I think is probably going to happen. We're going to nuke them. You watch. And people will go, that's strength. No, that's radioactive. But anyway, so he starts the whole thing off with top of the morning, which is like the equivalent of saying, they're always after me, Lucky Charms. Do you know, that's how offensive it was to say that. And then we downshifted into Trump reading an Irish proverb that he said he grew up listening to and knowing, and he loves this one, except it's not Irish, neither is golf. Golf was invented in Scotland, and it's not a proverb from either of those two European countries. No. It's actually even less Irish than top of the morning, or they're always after me, Lucky Charms. This proverb, always remember to forget the friends that proved untrue, but never forget to remember those who have stuck by you, is not Irish. It is written by a Nigerian poet. Somebody give him a book of poetry by W.B. Yeats. Somebody give him a James Joyce. Quickly! He really doesn't know. This is incredible. I mean, you can almost forgive them for not knowing, you know, the dictator of this particular African nation or the Congo or something like this, right? I mean, you know, they go, that's a gotcha question. I mean, you're only the leader of the free world, and you really, you know, only have like, 152, 156, leaders to learn, but that's too much for a president these days. So you kind of excuse them when they don't know some little tiny place, you know, Mauritius or something like this. Okay, but how can you not know that this is not Irish? So what does he do? He blames the State Department. I swear to God, Trump and the White House actually blamed the State Department, saying they provided the proverb. They did. It's the fault of the deep state. The deep state. They're trying to trip Trump up with Nigerian poetry. It's such a scandal, everybody. Woo! And then, of course, Trump mispronounces the name of the Irish Prime Minister's wife. But then he can't say big league correctly, so don't try foreign names, is what I would have said. And then Paul Ryan told this awful joke in an Irish accent, a terrible Irish accent. And quite frankly, he was funnier this week when he was trying to justify the healthcare plan, you know, with his PowerPoint presentation. Now, that was humor. That was funny. He should have done that one again. He should have revived for this little dog and pony show. And then he made this bewildering quip that seemed to indicate that he thought that golf came from Ireland and that Irish like royalty. Listen, James Joyce is difficult, but Paul Ryan was harder to understand. I must say. And then he raised a pint of Guinness with absolutely zero foamy head upon it. And people started tweeting, that looks like the pint that's left over in the smoking section after everybody else has gone home and the waiter actually goes to clean up, right? It looked like a pint of maple syrup sitting there. You know, they were like, what is that, Aunt Jemima's? That's not our Guinness. I mean, who would do that to a Guinness? How long has it been sitting there? So that was how the day started. That was the day. That was the beginning. Then Angela Merkel came. Did you see the body language? I can't even begin to tell you. It was so uncomfortable between the two of them. It was just bizarre. It's bizarre. And of course, Trump had to say, hey, they wiretapped her too, so maybe we have something in common. This was his comment, okay, to a world leader who, he needs to do business with. It's just, I'm telling, and this was 5 minutes into the day. This is just how it starts, right? And then, I started going over the budget because this is the new affront. This is the new disgrace. This is, like yesterday, we just touched on it a little because I had seen some of the cuts, right? And it looks like, the winner is the Pentagon, as always with Republican presidents. There's nothing shocking there except to say the Republicans aren't satisfied with this budget because they wanted more. They want more for the Pentagon. They don't think his $54 billion is even enough. I think they want $640 billion or some sick amount, But I was looking at some of the cuts yesterday as people were going through the budget and, commenting upon all these different programs that are going to get cut. And then when I got to housing and urban development, as soon as I got to the HUD cuts, all of a sudden, like a little bell, a light bulb, woo, goes off over my head. And I go, this really reminds me of something else. This seems like a redo. This seems like something I've read before, something I've studied before, something I've looked at before, something I understood before, something before that I had to explain to you guys, a lot of years ago, like maybe 16 years ago, I had to explain this to you. And you know what it is? I swear to God, this is Ronald Reagan's budget. This is literally this is Ronald Reagan's budget. And you know what happened, when Ronald Reagan was president, wages for the average worker declined. Home ownership in this country fell. You had an increase in poverty. You had, his indifference to urban problems was legendary. I mean, he didn't owe anything to urban voters, just like Trump doesn't owe anything to urban voters. He doesn't owe anything to big city mayors who he trashed on the road. Neither did Reagan. He doesn't like black or Hispanic people. Neither did Reagan. It's the only black, and this is what did it for me, truly. The only black member of Trump's cabinet is Housing and Urban Secretary, Dr. Pediatric Neurosurgeon Ben Carson. And the only black member of Reagan's cabinet was Housing and Urban Secretary Samuel Pierce. And then I remember telling you just, a couple of weeks ago, I don't even know if it was that long, about how Paul Manafort got into this major HUD scandal during the Reagan years, how Manafort had lobbied the Reagan administration and the Housing and Urban Development to invest into this Section 8 housing project in New Jersey. I think it was Seabreeze, New Jersey, and how his lobbying firm was paid like $326,000 for lobbying on behalf of this Section 8 housing project in Upper Deerfield Township, New Jersey, and how he got popped at the end for being somebody who was influence peddling. Remember that? And I told you all that. Yeah. Manafort's still, it's like the same exact, it's unbelievable. So, you know what? I can only find a little bit of archival footage. This is from the actual hearings that took place after. Now, the HUD scandal in Reagan's day was huge, but it didn't become apparent to the people of this country till after Reagan left office. That's how good they were. That no one knew about the HUD scandal until he had left office. But when in 1989, there were all these investigations about this HUD scandal because the federal government was bilked by Paul Manafort out of $47 million in 1980 dollars. That's a lot of dollars in 1980 dollars. He had actually gotten all these officials at the Department of Housing and Urban Development involved in this ill-planned, expensive, unneeded HUD contract for a place called Countryside Village. It was 326 units of one-story cinder block apartment buildings that were built to house former Japanese American internees in 1944. And what Manafort did was he put together at his lobby shop Black, Manafort, Stone, which was Charlie Black, Paul Manafort and Roger Stone. Yes, that Roger Stone. Crazy Roger Stone has been poisoned by polonium. And then yesterday, an attempt on his life was made in a car accident that he got into. He swears it's the deep state trying to off him. Anyway, they were partners, and they put together these housing political officials in the housing and urban development, and made friends with this Sam Pierce guy, who is in today's dollars Ben Carson. Same thing, right? And he finally got exposed because it cost the government $47 million. And he was called to testify to Congress. And when he was called to testify to Congress, he said, well, he and his development partners arranged to purchase the project, and their plan was to persuade Housing and Urban Development to give him funding for a very little bit of rehabilitation he was going to do to these apartments. And then he was going to make it available to low-income housing people, but he never did. They only advertised the apartments were available in one newspaper article, and they jacked up the price so that low-income housing people would never, ever live there. Anyway, this is the news, the nightly news from 1989, from the day that Paul Manafort testified.
Of how an unwanted housing project was developed anyway. The story was told before a House subcommittee investigating charges of influence peddling and corruption at the Department of Housing and Urban Development during the Reagan administration.
I think it's a horrible waste of taxpayers' money.
A horrible waste.
The people in our area are outraged that this kind of money is being wasted on this project.
The project was approved after lobbying by Paul Manafort, a top campaign strategist for President Bush. Manafort's consulting firm was paid $326,000, $1,000 for each unit. In April 1987, after Manafort's lobbying helped persuade HUD to make rent subsidies available, Manafort and some partners bought the apartments. Manafort said he was just working within the system, but...
I will stipulate for purposes of today that you could characterize this as influence peddling.
Thank you.
You could characterize what I did as influence peddling. I told you. And so this is so I'm reading this budget, and I see all these cuts to the housing and urban development, and I see Section 8 housing and all the, and I connect the dots. I go, oh my God, and I did connect the dots before for you, and I said, isn't it interesting that the scandal that the reason why you might know Paul Manafort's name isn't because he lobbied for every disgusting dank dictator in the world. No, the reason why you know his name is probably because you remember the housing and urban development scandal and his name was in it. Well, that's true. He was influence peddling, and he built our government out of $47 million. Charles Black, who was his law partner, he managed the 1988 presidential campaign of the HUD secretary, Jack Kemp, who was a member of the House, and Lee Atwater, the dirty trickster, who Roger Stone learned from, also joined the firm and became chairman of the Republican National Committee. And Manafort's statement, where he said he testified to Congress that day that he had spent 200 to 300 hours working on the New Jersey project, and he was billing the government for $1,000 an hour in 1980. So I look at this budget and I go, here we go again.
To speak to Randy, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
Randi Rhodes Air Force.
Buy a stinking podcast. Now that Trump's moved into the White House, I know. You could see he wasted no time. He went to work for his ultra-wealthy pals. He's making fundamental economic changes that are going to affect your money and your retirement. He's chipping away at banking regulations. He's going after Dodd-Frank, and that unwinds the fiduciary rule. That's a rule that keeps your money safe from deceptive financial practices. Like I said before, this administration is so awful. They are so greedy. And that's why now, more than ever, is the best time to diversify your retirement portfolio like I did. Goals, lows, no correlation with stocks and bonds can help you in times of uncertainty. Call my friends at ITM Trading. Get a free gold kit. Learn why gold survives every government, every currency, every economic crisis. Call ITM today at 1-888-OWN-GOLD for guidance from their precious metals experts. They've helped thousands of people just like me buy gold and silver coins and bars, and they can help you too. 1-888-OWN-GOLD. Call 1-888-OWN-GOLD.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1960. That was the day 5 Italian immigrant workers were killed in Toronto, Ontario, in what is known as the Hogs Hollow tragedy. Referred to as sand hogs, workers sought to connect a pumping station to the water distribution network. They were building a water main in a tunnel under the Don River. The project was already far behind schedule and over budget. Workers were welding in a compression chamber when smoke began to overwhelm the main shaft. Some workers made it out. Firefighters were prevented from releasing water into the tunnel to extinguish the fire over concerns that it would cause a collapse. In addition, there was no backup safety equipment at street level. The tragedy shed light on the appalling wage and working conditions immigrant workers faced just outside the city's borders. The persistent public outcry prompted exposés and investigations that revealed just how bad conditions were. It was truly a tale of two cities. Within the city, union requirements guaranteed breaks and enforcement of safety regulations. But just outside, it was a different story. According to Jamie Bradburn, who wrote for the Toronto Historicist in 2010, workers on suburban projects faced conditions that included lack of proper sanitation, poor safety inspections, illegal withholding of vacation pay, unpaid overtime, checks that often bounced, and groundless threats of deportation. The coroner's inquest determined that callous management, incompetent foremen, inexperienced workers, a disorganized rescue, and inefficiency at the Department of Labor caused the disaster. Though no criminal charges were ultimately laid, the sacrifice of the 5 men at Hogs Hollow brought about improvements in the conditions that had led to their demise.
We did it, you bastards! We're live! And it only took 2 years! Okay. All right. So we're back, we're live, and you're there, and we're here, and ain't that great? Now let me just tell you that if you want to listen whenever and wherever you'd like to listen, just go to randyrhodes.com, click on podcasts and swag, and get your podcast commercial-free, on demand, on any device. randyrhodes.com. Open all day, every day.
Clear for takeoff. The Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandyRhodes.com.
We can't spend money on programs just because they sound good and great. Meals on Wheels sounds great. Again, that's a state decision to fund that particular portion of it, to take the federal money and give it to the states and say, look, we want to give you money for programs that don't work. I can't defend that anymore. We cannot defend that anymore. We're $20 trillion in debt. We're going to spend money. We're going to spend a lot of money, but we're not going to spend it on programs that cannot show that they actually deliver the promises that we've made to people.
Oh, God, he's cutting Meals on Wheels. Like, that's going to make a difference. You know, he's cutting Meals on Wheels, after school programs for 1.6 million kids. 1.6 million kids. He said it doesn't make a difference in there. And you know, they're lying. It's you know, I have actual numbers in front of me that you would think that the manager of the Office of Management and Budget, you know, would understand. You would think that he would understand that these after-school programs actually work. But he's standing there at the podium like everyone else that stands at the podium and represents Donald Trump does. And he's lying. He's lying. Listen to this. Listen.
After-school programs generally. They're supposed to be educational programs, right? And that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to help kids who don't get fed at home get fed so they do better in school. Guess what? there's no demonstrable evidence they're actually doing that. There's no demonstrable evidence they're actually helping results, they're helping kids do better in school, which is what, when we took your money from you to say, look, we're going to go spend on an after-school program, the way we justified it was, these programs are going to help these kids do better in school and get better jobs. And we can't prove that that's happening.
To be clear, we're saying, the administration with this budget is saying that no after-school programs out there are doing their job in helping educate these children.
No, but I don't, and again, now you're asking me a question I don't know the answer to, but I don't believe we cut all the funding for those types of things.
Oh my God, this Mick Mulvaney dude is evil. He is pure evil. But so is Tom Price, and I think it's a toss-up between who's the most smarmy. Because Tom Price told cancer patients who said, I need my Medicaid because I was, saved by Medicaid. I had, a third-stage colon cancer, and I was saved by Medicaid. And he actually looks this guy in the eye, and he goes, well, I'm glad it works for you, but you know what? It doesn't work for everybody, and so too bad, we're going to cut it. I mean, that town hall, I don't know how many people saw it, but it was the most sickening, disgusting thing. And then the next girl that came up, she said, well, I also have Medicaid, and I was diagnosed at age 29 with breast cancer, and thank God for Medicaid, and thank God for Planned Parenthood, where I got my breast screening. I caught it, and I'm good, and I survived it. And he said, well, I'm glad Medicaid works for you and for him, but it doesn't work for anybody else. We're cutting it. I mean, it was the sickest thing. That's who these people are. They are just smarmy, lying sacks of crap. But let's deal with Mulvaney's claim that after-school programs have not, for 1.6 million kids, which is what he's talking about here, that he's cutting. It's called the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. That is what he's cutting, okay? And it affects 1.6 million kids. And he says there's no evidence to prove that it helps kids learn. Well, the study after study after study that have been done on these 21st Century Community Learning Centers, which supports before and after school programs for 1.6 million kids, has been studied by the Harvard Family Research Project and others. I'll just give you this one. They have shown over and over again that these programs do help students' performance in terms of grades, that's important, test scores, attendance, participation in class, and more. The Global Family Research Project, which is the Harvard Family Research Project now, and the After School Alliance, who also did research on this, they're a nonpartisan organization. They said, I don't know what he's talking about. Quote, there's a lot of evidence engaging kids in high quality after school and programs, many of which are supported by 21st Century Community Learning Centers grants, results in kids doing better in school. They're more likely to graduate, and they're more likely to excel in the labor market. Hey, let's cut that crap out. Let's just, let's just hobble that program, because according to Mick Mulvaney, he hasn't seen any, and the Meals on Wheels program, oh my God. You have elderly people who cannot leave their apartments. They can't leave their homes. And maybe the only person they see all day is the Meals on Wheels delivery person. I mean, you wonder why you see commercials all of a sudden for Meals on Wheels. This is why suddenly you see commercials for Meals on Wheels. Because they know that even though they're running short of meals, I mean like millions of meals short, and they're already operating at a deficit, that this guy was going to come in and cut that program back to the bone, and that, senior citizens were going to have to go and do what we used to talk about in the 80s, eat cat food for dinner. Now, let me show you why I know this is Reagan's budget, okay? I went and researched, some of the older newspaper articles about Ronald Reagan and about his budget so that I could read them to you so that you can compare what Trump proposed, which obviously, it cuts. Look, the slight winner here is the Pentagon, as you know. Everything else is a loser. The National Institutes of Health, their cancer research project, the Moonshot for Cancer, has been cut by $5 billion in this budget. Urban development, he said he was going to fix the inner cities. The housing and urban development cuts, 13% cuts. And that includes everything from affordable housing, community development, legal aid for people who have no access to lawyers. Like if the bank should redline them and they're trying to open up a store, they have access to legal aid. It cuts all that. The EPA, Health and Human Services Research, the State Department, the Labor Department, Agriculture. Whenever you hear agriculture, think food stamps, okay? Think ABT cards. Transportation, where's his infrastructure investment? It's not there. The only money that goes to infrastructure is the money to start building the wall. Everything else takes a hit. Everything else in development is cut or canceled. The Commerce Department is cut. Schools are cut. Public broadcasting disappears. The Appalachian Regional Commission. Now, this is the problem. People in Appalachia don't even know that they have such a thing as the Appalachian Regional Commission. What do they do? Well, let's see. Between October 2012 and January 2017, so this is current, right? The Appalachian Regional Commission supported 55 projects with only $24 million, okay? This is where he's cutting. Only $24 million. Those investments have been matched by state funds, another $24.6 million in state and local funds. And what does it do? It develops critical infrastructure. What is that? That's broadband. That's water. That's sewer. We were talking about that yesterday. $13 million has gone toward entrepreneurial and business strategies to teach people how to be small business owners, how to be entrepreneurs. In fact, it created 2,750 jobs and educated 16,500 students and people who are looking to cross-train out of coal mining into opening up a store or learning business. That's where they're cutting. That's where they're cutting. An adult daycare center that's been planned at the site of a former elementary school, the Falls Mills Elementary School in the city of Bluefield. They also have the Cool and Connected program, which, enhances broadband in the region so that people can get connected to the internet there and look for jobs. This is what the Appalachian Regional Community Commission does. And people in that area, they know that they're getting help, but they don't know where it's coming from. I just wanted to draw your attention to that particular thing because that's getting cut. The Chemical Safety Board that checks your water. The National Commission, it's just there's so many. There's so many. I got this whole list here, and I shorthanded some of it. But he does increase the money to Homeland Security by $2.8 billion, and that is segregated for one thing and one thing only, and that is the start of the border wall. He also allocates to Homeland Security $1.5 billion for a private prison system for detainees, and $314 million for 1,500 more Border Patrol agents and immigration officers. And that is the only money that goes to Homeland Security. Everything else in Homeland Security is being cut. The Nuclear Safety Administration, he puts $1.4 billion into that, which is 11.3% more than we already spend, and more than half of it goes to building new nuclear weapons. For those of you who were concerned about the opioid addiction, guess where the money goes for the fight against opioid addiction? Do you think because Medicaid goes away and Medicaid provides for rehab? And if the Obamacare plans go away, they were the first plans we ever had that had mental health parity and addiction care in them. So that if your brain was betraying you and you had schizophrenia or you had, bipolar disorder or you had OCD that was making your life impossible, whatever it was, you could now get coverage under the Obamacare plans because they had 10 basic coverages that included mental health care and rehab. If you found yourself addicted to either alcohol or drugs or whatever, then you could actually go to a rehab place and have insurance to pay for it. Well, that all goes away, right? Because they're going to make limited benefit plans that you pick and choose from, right? you pick and choose the coverage you need, which is crazy. So you could actually pick a plan where you could see a primary care physician, but you can't get a prescription filled. Great. Anyway, the opioid addiction plan, he puts $500 million into Health and Human Services, but guess where it's earmarked for? The Justice Department, for enforcement. Not for rehabilitation, not for mental health care, not for anything that would help somebody transition from an addictive drug over to, something that, looks like life. No, it goes, the $500 million that is spent on opioid addiction goes to law enforcement. That's sick. Then in the Department of Education, there is a $9 billion cut for the Department of Education. 13% cut. There is one small investment in education, $1.4 billion for school choice. So that is now, the privatization of schools. That's going to be the new Section 8 housing thing. Now, this is what I wanted to show you about Ronald Reagan. Okay, I need to read this. I need to read this so you know I'm not making this up. I believe Gwen Ifill, dearly departed Gwen Ifill, wrote this as a Washington Post reporter back in the good old days, right? She writes, Reagan's fans gave him credit for restoring the nation's prosperity, but whatever economic growth occurred during the Reagan years only benefited those already well off. The income gap between the rich and everyone else in America widened, wages for the average worker declined, and the nation's home ownership rates fell. During Reagan's 2 terms in the White House, which were boon times for the rich, poverty rate in cities grew. His indifference to urban problems was legendary. Reagan owed little to urban voters, big city mayors, black or Hispanic leaders, or labor unions, the major advocates for metro area concerns. Early in his presidency, at a White House reception, Reagan greeted the only black member of his cabinet, Housing and Urban Development Secretary Samuel Pierce, by saying, "How are you, Mr. Mayor? I'm glad to meet you. How are things in your city?" Except he was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Reagan not only failed to recognize his own HUD secretary, he failed to deal with the growing corruption scandal at the agency, that's Paul Manafort, that resulted in the indictment and conviction of top Reagan administration officials for illegally targeting housing subsidies to politically connected developers. Fortunately for Reagan, the HUD scandal wasn't uncovered until he left office. Reagan also presided over the dramatic deregulation of the nation's savings and loan industry, allowing savings and loans to end their reliance on home mortgages and engage in an orgy of commercial real estate speculation. The result was widespread corruption, mismanagement, and the collapse of hundreds of thrift institutions that ultimately led to a taxpayer bailout that cost hundreds of billions of dollars. The 1980s saw pervasive racial discrimination by banks, real estate agents, landlords. This was Trump. Unmonitored by the Reagan administration, community groups uncovered blatant redlining by banks using Federal Home Mortgage Disclosure Act information, but Reagan's HUD and Justice Departments failed to prosecute or sanction banks that violated the Community Reinvestment Act, which prohibits racial discrimination in lending. This is something you'll hear conservatives call the show and blame for the housing bust that we experienced in 2008. They never blame the banks. They never blame the corruption. They never blame the AAA ratings that these garbagey loans got. No, they never blame the ratings agency or anybody else. They blame the housing, the Community Reinvestment Act, and only because the Community Reinvestment Act prohibited discrimination in lending. That's why. So that's like classic racism right there. But anyway, during that time, of the 40,000 applications from banks requesting permission to expand their operations, Reagan's bank regulators denied only 8 of them on the grounds of violating the Community Reinvestment Act regulations. By the end of Reagan's term in office, Now, this is exactly what they're saying here, okay? They're going to cut all this federal assistance. This is what he says about Meals on Wheels. The states can pay, the states can pay, the states can pay, right? By the end of Reagan's term in office, federal assistance to local governments was down 60%. Reagan eliminated general revenue sharing to cities, slashed funding for public service jobs. This is what they're going after here, too, government workers. They went after job training, which is what I just showed you in the Appalachian Reinvestment, the Appalachian Commission, right? Job training. They dismantled federally funded legal services. Told you he's going after legal aid for the poor. They cut the Anti-Poverty Community Development Block Grant Program, which is on the cutting block today. And they reduced funds for public transportation. The only urban program that survived Reagan's cuts was federal aid for highways, which benefited suburbs, not cities. And the effects of these cutbacks? Cities with high levels of poverty and limited property tax bases, think Flint, think Detroit, right? Many of which depend on federal aid. In 1980, federal dollars accounted for 22% of big city budgets. By the end of Reagan's second term, federal aid was down to 6%. And the consequences to urban schools and libraries and hospitals and clinics and sanitation and waterways and police and fire departments was devastating. Many had to shut their doors. These are essential things that people pay taxes for, whether it's sales tax, which, Donald Trump says, well, I don't pay that much in federal tax, but I pay a lot in sales tax and excise tax. I pay FICA taxes on my employee, right? Okay. So here, Ronald Reagan, as he was cutting all these things for the people who are the most vulnerable in our society, he created this welfare queen. Does everybody remember the welfare queen? She drove a Cadillac. She ripped off $150,000 from the government using 80 aliases and 30 addresses and a dozen social security cards and 4 fictional dead husbands. Well, people searched all through the 80s for this woman who did not exist. It's the same thing all over again.
All things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, The Randy Rhodes Show.
Buy a stinking podcast.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says the Trump budget shortchanges working people by trying to balance the budget on their backs. Trumka says working people in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin didn't vote for a budget that slashes workforce training and fails to invest in our nation's infrastructure. The AFL-CIO says the $54 billion Trump's budget cuts to programs that benefit working families is dangerous and destructive. The AFL-CIO Trump budget analysis says the budget abandons the future, slashing investments in workers, communities, young people, protecting our environment, and building democracy. There are major cuts in job training, education, health programs, the environment, the arts, and foreign aid. Research programs in science and medicine are slashed. The Economic Policy Institute says that Trump's budget is a disaster for public investment. Despite promising to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure rebuilding to create jobs, Trump's budget actually cuts the Department of Transportation budget by 13%, and there's no infrastructure jobs investment in the budget. EPI says Trump is taking money from the already small non-defense discretionary spending federal budget to pay for military and border security increases. Public Citizens U.S. Chamber Watch says the Chamber of Commerce has a history of litigating to limit rights of consumers, small businesses, and investors. At the same time, that legal action defends corporate bad actors, no matter how bad they are. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce also aggressively uses the courts to limit government enforcement actions against corporate bad actors, according to Public Citizen. Check out their full report at chamberofcommercewatch.org. Actors Equity Association President Kate Schendel says that eliminating the National Endowment for the Arts would hurt the restaurant, hospitality, retail, and transportation economies in theater districts nationwide. Trump wants to eliminate the $149 million arts endowment. Schendel says the arts endowment money helps to create jobs. The NEA funds arts programs in 16,000 communities and every congressional district. Schendel defended the National Endowment for the Arts in a speech Thursday at the National Press Club.
Sponsored by Ironworkers Impact, now reserving spots for this year's groundbreaking conference, welcoming contractors to grow their business by networking and attending world-class breakouts. More on this event in San Diego, happening March 19th through the 22nd, is found online at impact-net.org under Events.
WIN is made possible in part by the OPEIU, the Office of Professional Employees International Union.
Workers Independent News is proud to be heard on The Union Edge, Labor's Talk Radio. Live nationwide weekdays noon to 3 p.m. at theunionedge.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The Randi Rhodes Show is brought to you by our partners at ITM Trading. Call them at 1-888-OWN-GOLD and ask for a free gold kit. 1-888-OWN-GOLD.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on randyrhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or progressivevoices.com now.
More about what message the president is trying to send by eliminating a lot of funding for science and climate change, as you researchers mentioned earlier. And just to follow up later when you have a chance to answer that.
Sure. A couple different messages when we talk about science and climate change. Well, let's deal with them separately. On science, we're going to focus on the core function. There's reductions, for example, I think in the NIH, National Institutes for Health. Why? Thank you. Why? Because we think there's been mission creep. We think they do things that are outside their core functions. We think there's tremendous opportunity for savings. We recommend, for example, that a couple of facilities be combined and there'd be cost savings from that. Again, this comes back to the president's business person view of government, which is if you took over this as a CEO and you look at this on a spreadsheet and go, why do we have all of these facilities? Why do we have 7 when we can do the same job with 3? Won't that save money? And the answer is yes. So part of your answer is focusing on efficiencies and focusing on doing what we do better. Regarding the question as to climate change, I think the president was fairly straightforward. Is that we're not spending money on that anymore.
Oh my God.
We consider that to be a waste of your money to go out and do that. So that is a specific tie to his campaign.
Oh my God, climate change is like one of the biggest things facing humankind on this planet. And he thinks it's a waste of money, but what isn't a waste of money is new nuclear weapons. That's what they want to put money into, new nuclear weapons, $52 billion for weapons and $2 billion for new nuclear weapons. But $1.5 million can't go to Appalachia. to educate people about how 16,500 people to cross train from coal miners to entrepreneurs. We can't have that. 2,750 jobs were created in Appalachia because of this Appalachian community grant, and the states matched it, and they were able to get people to own their own businesses, create infrastructure that would allow for broadband to be brought to rural areas so that they could open businesses. You can't really run a business if without the internet anymore. It's just amazing what they're now. This budget, just so you know, has zero chance of passing. And number 2, Congress spends the money. So why does the president put up a budget? The president can't spend any money, not a nickel. But the president lays out his priorities in this political document. This is a statement of the priorities of the president of the United States, and that is why they put out a budget. Now, if you look at what this president prioritizes, it is new nuclear weapons, because we don't have enough of those. It is $54 billion to the Pentagon. It is a down payment on his border wall, but it cuts everything else that would benefit human beings living in this country. Cancer research, housing and urban development, Meals on Wheels, rural development, broadband extension into rural communities, the EPA, the Environmental Agency, education, schools, public broadcasting, chemical safety, the Department of Transportation. He said he was going to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure. He lied. I'm shocked. He lied. He's spending no money on. In fact, he wants to privatize. This is his priority: privatize air traffic controllers. Okay, this is so Reagan. I mean, when you think about this, Patco, and how Reagan, fired all the air traffic. This is the privatization of air traffic controls. This is zero investment in airports, zero investment in tunnels, zero investment in high-speed rail, zero investment into, rural airports so that they can receive bigger planes or better, commercial business, make new hubs. It was all a lie. This big infrastructure package that he said he was going to. None of it is in here. None of it. All that's in here is a cut to after-school programs, cancer research, the Department of Transportation infrastructure, including airports, rental assistance for people that can't afford their rent, food stamps, and the Meals on Wheels, the LIHEAP program that helps people pay for their electric bills and their heating bills in the cold of winter in rural Maine, rural Vermont, where they got 32 inches of snow this week. And so now they're going to go, well, do I eat or do I pay for the heat? Federal workers are going to be fired. I mean, if I just look at one agency, let's say, let's do the EPA, okay? The EPA, 50 programs are being cut from the Environmental Protection Agency, and that means 3,200 people will be laid off. That's just one little cut, one little agency. Homeless shelters, homeless assistance, low-income housing, everything that serves, inner cities, everything that serves, the least of us, the most rural of us, and the most depressed cities like Flint, Michigan. That, where the kids got lead poisoning, because this is what they did. They fired the entire city council, and they put businessmen, emergency managers in charge. And let me show you something. When Ronald Reagan started downsizing all these agencies who did oversight, right? Who did he put in charge? This is the business argument, right? Reagan appointed a housing task force, and I'm sure that, you'll start to hear this from Trump, too. We'll do a housing task force. Well, it was dominated by the Paul Manaforts of the world. It was politically connected developers. It was landlords. It was bankers. In 1982, he set up a task force, and they released a report that called for free and deregulated markets as an alternative to government assistance. And Reagan said, yeah, let's do that, because the free market always works. In his first year in office, he halved the budget for public housing and Section 8 housing to about $17.5 billion. And for the next few years, he sought to eliminate federal housing assistance to the poor altogether. And they ended up with a major outbreak. Remember we were just talking about this yesterday. A major outbreak of homelessness. They put business people in charge, like Paul Manafort, who managed to get $47 million out of housing and urban development, saying that they were going to do over these Section 8 houses, make them beautiful and da-da-da-da-da. Never happened, but they walked away with the money. You know how they walked away with the money? Like 2 days before the money was granted to them, they bought it. And then they refused to rent to low-income people. So what you had during Reagan was you had the amount of low income renter units decrease, and the number of homeless who needed them increase. You had 5.6 million less units and 8.9 million more homeless. That's a great result, isn't it? And that's where we're heading. And you know who those homeless people were? They were Vietnam veterans, for the most part, laid off workers, and people who had been pushed out of public mental facilities, mental health care facilities. I grew up next door to one of those facilities. I grew up in Queens next to Creedmoor. Look it up. And when he defunded Creedmoor, all of a sudden you had all these people sleeping in front of EJ Corvettes. You had all these, homeless people sleeping in front of our grocery store. All of a sudden, you had all these Vietnam vets wandering Manhattan, sleeping in the doorways and in boxes and in blankets. And it was just 600,000 on any given night.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit randyrhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Now, the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn presents the Green News Report.
We want to be the car capital of the world again. We will be. And it won't be long, believe me.
Trump orders EPA to roll back fuel economy standards and plans to cut EPA's budget even more than previously known.
Researchers have confirmed that for the second year in a row, Australia's Great Barrier Reef has fallen victim to mass bleaching.
Large sections of the Great Barrier Reef have died thanks to global warming. Plus,
they began coming down from the mountains and now they aren't going back.
6 years after the Fukushima nuclear disaster, radioactive bores complicate residents' return.
All of those complications and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Let it be known, if you are driving a Prius and I support NPR bumper sticker is redundant. We know.
Yes, we know. Coexist. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we're learning more and more about Donald Trump's plans, hopes to slash the Environmental Protection Agency today.
Yes, we are. More on that in a moment, though. First, President Trump went to Michigan on Wednesday to announce he has ordered the EPA to begin the lengthy process of rolling back stringent fuel economy standards for cars and trucks sold in the United States.
Fantastic.
We're going to work on the CAFE standards so you can make cars in America again.
Of course, American automakers never stopped making cars in America, but those fuel standards were set to come into effect in 2022 and would have reduced carbon emissions and air pollution and saved consumers thousands of dollars at the gas pump.
By increasing mileage on those cars.
Indeed. Automakers had agreed to the higher CAFE standards in the auto industry bailout back in 2009, but last month they requested the Trump administration rewrite those standards, claiming they're too expensive. And now consumers are preferring SUVs because of low gas prices. Climate Progress reports that rescinding those higher fuel economy standards will cost consumers nearly $2,000 in additional net fuel costs, increase asthma rates, and ultimately will undermine the U.S. automakers' competitiveness as the rest of the world moves toward more efficient fuel economy standards.
Yeah, but on Fox News, they told viewers that these CAFE standards were terrible, were hurting the car industry. Of course, they were lying, but Donald Trump believes any lie he hears on Fox News.
In fact, Consumer Reports has found that 84% of Americans want automakers to continue improving fuel efficiency. Meanwhile, the Trump administration also plans even deeper cuts to the budget of the Environmental Protection Agency than previously thought just a few weeks ago. Instead of 25%, now it's 31%. For comparison, last year, congressional Republicans suggested the EPA's budget should be $8 billion. Then the Trump administration proposed a budget of $6 billion. EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt then asked for $7 billion. The Trump White House responded by cutting EPA's budget further to $5.7 billion.
So they're not even giving Scott Pruitt, the new head of the EPA, who hates the EPA, they're not even giving him the money that he wants. They want to cut it more than him.
Exactly. Now, these are only proposals. The numbers could change when the budget goes to Congress.
Oh, it will. I know even Republicans are not happy about cutting the EPA that much.
More heat has been absorbed by the oceans over the last 50 years than has previously been reported. That's the conclusion of an international team of American and Chinese scientists in a new study that uses updated ocean temperature data and new analysis than has previously been the content of the planet's oceans. The researchers say the oceans are warming 13% faster than previously believed, and that the ocean's heat uptake is accelerating. The ocean heat has been damaging coral reefs around the world, and now large sections of the Great Barrier Reef are confirmed dead. That's according to Australia's lead management agency for the reef. They warn that unless the ocean heat subsides, some areas of the reef may never recover. The central part of the world's largest reef is now showing signs of extensive bleaching due to record high ocean temperatures off the coast of Australia as the ocean heat wave extends into a second consecutive year.
Good thing we're lowering the emissions standards on our cars here.
Finally, this week marks the 6th anniversary of the meltdown of the 3 nuclear reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan after a record earthquake and tsunami in 2011. The plant still requires extraordinary daily efforts to keep the reactors cool, and officials are still struggling with storage and disposal of staggering amounts of radioactive water and waste. The cost of cleanup is now an estimated $188 billion, double previous estimates. And now, efforts to allow residents to return to some of the towns within the exclusion zone have been hampered by herds of radioactive wild boars that have taken over the abandoned towns.
Wow. And I thought radioactive wild boars had taken over our country. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Well, I'm not uptight, not unattractive. Turn me on tonight, 'cause I'm radioactive.
This has been the Green News Report on the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
This hour, but we have our first question. It's from Brian Klein from Pennsylvania. Brian, thanks very much. Early last year, Brian was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. He's now cancer-free. Brian, you have a question.
Thank you, Wolf. Yes, Medicaid expansion saved my life and saved me from medical bankruptcy. Now, I earn $11.66 an hour at my retail job, and obviously I cannot afford to pay for my cancer care out of pocket. My life really depends on having access to my doctors and medical care. Getting a cancer diagnosis is bad enough, but Medicaid expansion gives me the economic security in knowing that funding is always going to be there for my cancer care. So my question for you, Secretary Price, is pretty straightforward. Why do you want to take away my Medicaid expansion?
Brian, thanks for that question, and thank goodness that things are going well from your healthcare standpoint. As a physician, I practiced medicine over 20 years and took care of a lot of patients with cancer, and it was one of those challenges that when it faces you as an individual or someone in your family, you want to make certain that you've got access to the highest quality care that you can receive. The fact of the matter is that we don't. We don't want to take care away from anybody. What we want to make certain, though, is that every single American has access to the kind of coverage and care that they want for themselves. If you look at the Medicaid program right now, we have 1/3 of the physicians in this nation, Brian, who are not seeing Medicaid patients. And so if we want to be honest with ourselves as a society, it's important that we step back and say, why is that? Why are those doctors not seeing Medicaid patients? And let me just suggest it's because the Medicaid program itself has real problems in it. And so what we want to do is, one, reform the Medicaid system, make certain that individuals who are currently on Medicaid or on the expansion either are able to retain that or move to a system that might be much more responsive to them through a series of advanceable refundable credits, a way to get coverage that they choose for themselves and for their family, not that the government forces on them. So thanks. It's wonderful that you have received the care that you've received, and
Look at his
because
face.
of the incredible innovations and great doctors across
If
this land.
he could rip off Tom Price's head with his eyes, he would.
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned doctors.
Let me just interrupt for 1 second, because I just want to get specific on the Medicaid issue, and this is so important to Brian and so many other people out there. Well, let me ask you, first of all, do you think the Secretary answered your question?
Unfortunately, no, I don't believe he did answer my question, Wolf, because, according to my knowledge, the American Health Care Act under the Republican leadership bill is going to sunset Medicaid, I believe, in 2020. Now, of course, you have a faction of conservative Republicans who want to sunset it even sooner.
That's right.
So this is not going to help me.
So they think they're talking to some idiot. They think that this is a man who it's so funny, but once it's not funny. Once something happens to you, you become an expert in it. So here's a man who got diagnosed late, obviously, 3rd stage colon cancer. Medicaid actually worked for him. He was able to see, obviously, a surgeon. Obviously, he was able to see an oncologist. Obviously, he was able to get prescription drug coverage all through Medicaid. And here you've got smarmy little Tom Price telling him it won't work. It doesn't work, Medicaid. I'm glad it worked for you, but it doesn't work for other people. After and then he said, did he answer your question? And he said, no, because I'm very well aware of the sunset provision in the Medicaid expansion. And I know that there are conservative Republicans who don't even want to wait till 2020. They want to get rid of Medicaid in 2018, next year. And what the hell does that mean for me? I just got through 3rd stage colon cancer, and it did work for me. I was able to see a doctor, a surgeon, an oncologist, get my prescription drugs. He probably had chemotherapy, 3rd stage anything. I'm assuming he had chemotherapy. Honest to God, man, you know what the bills for that? And Tom Price is like, well, I'm glad you made it. But we're still going to do it because, what we want to do is we want to give you a refundable tax credit. Man made $11.76 an hour at his retail job. You do the math. $400 a week before FICA taxes come out. That's $1,600 a month. Where is he going to find a health care plan that costs less than $1,600 a month, which would be his entire paycheck for the month? Seriously, dude. He is such a disgusting. And then Mulvaney, he stands up and says Meals on Wheels and after school care for kids doesn't work. What are you going to tell all these parents now who are lucky enough to live someplace where there is a 21st century learning center where they can, tell their kid after school, they're going to pick you up and they're going to put you, and you'll do your homework there or whatever. And of course, these programs have been well researched by, the Harvard Family Research Project or by the After School Alliance, nonpartisan people, obviously. And they say there's a lot of evidence that engaging kids in high-quality after-school programs, many of which are supported by 21st century community learning centers, results in kids doing better in school. They're more likely to graduate. They're more likely to excel in the labor market. They do better. They get better grades, better test scores, better attendance, better participation, better graduation rates, and a whole lot more. But they just spew this nonsense from these podiums so that we're going to have a country where people pay taxes and no one is going to see anything that looks like a civilized society as a result of it. All we're going to see is an investment in nuclear weapons. This is insane. Completely insane. And the reason why it's important is because this was Donald Trump's first chance to show America whether or not, when he was on the campaign trail running as a populist, well, we're going to put the coal miners back to work, and we're going to fix Appalachia, and we're going to make sure everybody's got broadband, and we're going to make sure everybody's got a world-class education, and we're going to make sure that, we build that wall, and Mexico is going to pay for that wall, and we're going to make sure that, poverty, we attack it, and we do something about the inner cities, and we know we have an opioid addiction problem out there. For God's sake, there's TV commercials called opioid-induced constipation. Opioid-induced constipation is now a medical issue for enough Americans that Big Pharma thinks it needs to run commercials with a man that says he had a very Movantic moment. Don't hold it in, he says. Have a Movantic moment. There's nothing more Movantic than taking a handful of opioids, not being able to poop, and then taking Movantic and just sitting in the toilet for like hours, just let it go. It's just, don't hold it in. And what does he do for the opioid thing? He puts $500 million into law enforcement. That's why it's important, because these are his priorities. This man is a world heavyweight champion con man. Karen in Whittier, California.
Hey, Randy.
Hey. I know, but it's St. Patrick's Day. I'm giving everybody a reason to get really drunk tonight. Get out the Jameson, everybody. Get out the Guinness. Let's do this thing. I'll be tweeting.
Yeah, well, I'm married too. Half Irish, half Puerto Rican. So what do you want?
Oh, well, enjoy this, because God only knows he embarrassed us so bad on St. Patrick. Can you imagine what's going to happen on Cinco de Mayo? Can you imagine?
Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
He's going to sit there with a taco bowl while he, rounds up, brown people, and he's going to, put them in private prisons, and he's going to celebrate with a tweet.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
God.
One of my favorite topics whenever we bring up budgeting is the Pentagon. My husband works in aerospace, and he works for what's called, what a sub-tier is, right? I'm sure you've heard all this wonderful jargon. Basically, they're a subcontractor for the bigger aerospace company. So, they got all the parts for things like the F-18, the F-15, the JSF, the C-17 when it was still going, blah, 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 blah. Well, the JSF is the F-35 now. And his company, the previous company we're for and the one he works for now, they've been doing the parts for the F-35 since, it went into production.
Is there a point?
The thing is the budgeting for the military is ridiculous when you look at all this.
Well, that's because they privatized, like you said, a whole bunch of military, duties.
Exactly.
I mean,
well, not only that,
don't you remember when our guys were in Iraq? They actually had, I forget which fast food chain, but they had like Arby's or Burger King or KFC.
Arby's and Burger King were all
whatever happened to KP duty, the good old-fashioned way that I used to have to do it. I used to have to peel potatoes. I used to have to, peel carrots. I used to have to, and that was punishment. I agree. But you know what? We used to do it for ourselves. Now everything is privatized. Even the war fighters are privatized. We had all these defense contractors involved in the war fighting, and we were paying them $120,000 a year. Meanwhile, a low-ranking reservist in a combat zone maybe brings home $1,000 a month.
Right. Well, and then the thing is that when you go look at Pentagon budgeting, they have not audited the Pentagon since McNamara. Because when McNamara came in, he changed how they did all the purchasing for Pentagon. And they can't audit it. It is impossible to audit the Pentagon because it's such a mess. It is such a complete and utter mess.
Well, this is what happens when you privatize. This is what happens when you get business people who look at everything as a profit center, an opportunity to make money. This is why healthcare is going to be a mess. He's looking at it as an opportunity for private insurers to make money. And once you put profit motives into things like war fighting or healthcare, you get the same result. You get bloated.
But it's hurting our military. It's hurting our military.
Of course it's hurting our military. And the people who are deployed, they know it because their wives are back home or their husbands are back home with the kids. And they're either lucky enough to live on-base housing so they don't have to pay rent, but they still can't afford to go grocery shopping. Okay. Meanwhile, you've got these private contractors from Eric Prince, who's Betsy DeVos's brother. He's running these private warfighting operations, and his contractors are making $120,000 a year, and they don't have to live under the uniform code. So you get these YouTube videos of them driving down the road in Baghdad with Johnny Cash music playing, shooting random people on the side of the road.
But the on top of it all, it makes our military inefficient. We have so much stuff that our military...
I know. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm giving you concrete examples so that listeners can understand, so that people who aren't involved in military or military contracting or fighting the wars or serving the country can understand. There is a privatization... Listen, the whole war plan in Iraq, remember shock and awe? Okay, we're supposed to go straight to Baghdad. Yeah, well, that didn't happen. You know why? Because Eric Prince's contractors decided not to listen to the generals. They decided they were going to go into Fallujah. And they got captured in Fallujah because they didn't know what they were doing. They're private contractors. They went into Fallujah, and those contractors were captured, killed, burned, and hung from a bridge. That happened on March 31st, 2004. I remember it because it was the first day of Air America. And I was standing in my apartment in New York watching the TV going, oh my God, how the hell do I tell this to people? How do I tell them that the entire war, which was bogus in the first place, was now done for profit, that the whole thing was privatized? And it changed our entire war plan, because now instead of going straight to Baghdad the way we were supposed to, in and out, we had to go to Fallujah because these contractors were in Fallujah and they got stuck in there. Casey in California.
Hey, Randy, thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I love you so much, and thanks for everything you do.
You're welcome.
So with all, it's so distracting with, the budget and all the things that are out. You get so, you get caught in the minutia of things. So what I've tried to do lately is try to look at things through a simple lens, and that all of this goes back to what Steve Bannon said when he was at CPAC. This is deconstruction.
Yes.
So all the social programs, we can sit back and go, oh my God, this is horrible. Look, what's the second largest cut in that budget? The State Department.
Yes.
They're cutting the State Department. So we don't want to have contact with the rest of the world. We're trying to isolate ourselves. And that's what this is. So every time I see something like this and I get angry, I stop and I think it's either division, distraction, or deconstruction. That's what all of this is.
It's all part of the same goal. And Reagan had it too. It was deregulation, free markets, privatization of every function of government, which cannot work, doesn't work, and of course, shrinking government. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you. The 14 most frightening words. They have to create these imaginary boogeymen like the welfare queen to and these border jumpers, and it's all the illegals that are doing it to you. They create.
That's the division. That's the division.
No, that's the fake. That's the fake news. That's the fake narrative, so that they can privatize everything. And I will tell you this: General Mattis, okay, Donald Trump's own pick. General Mattis said, if you cut the State Department, all that's going to happen is I'm going to have to spend more on ammunition.
And he was on TV last night saying, well, we don't need the State Department as much because we're not going to have as many wars.
Who said that?
Tillerson.
No, I'm talking about General Mattis.
Oh, Mattis, I'm sorry.
General
My bad.
Mattis, Trump's own Mad Dog Mattis, the guy he loves so much, said to him, if you cut the State Department, if you cut smart power, all that's going to happen is I'm going to have to spend more on ammunition. Now, Tillerson is a joke. Tillerson is an executive from ExxonMobil, and that he is our Secretary of State is one of the most bizarre indicators of what's to come. We're going to become,
and not one moment,
we're going to become more like the communists in Russia. We're going to become more of a kleptocracy, where the very well connected, the Manaforts of the world, just his friends are going to walk away with defense contracts, and they're going to walk away with prison contracts, and they're going to walk away with
lots of oil,
lots of pipelines, and all this, and everyone else is going to pay for it with their tax dollars and get absolutely nothing. That's what happened in the 80s, and income inequality but our income inequality issue in the United States, while it's still there and it's growing, and obviously is going to get an injection of adrenaline from Donald Trump's policies, is nothing compared to the inequality in Russia. I've been all over the Baltic states, okay? And Russia, let me tell you, you've got multi-billionaires, almost trillionaires, a handful of them, and then everybody else who can they go to the store, there's nothing on the shelves. I don't think people get this.
Well, this is the difference right now between Reagan and Trump, is that we still have the Putin factor. Putin is still involved in this, I believe. I don't think it's over. I don't think it's stopped with the tampering of our election. I still think that there's an elbow in Trump.
I don't know what there is. I will say it's odd that he has all these Putin lovers around him. And if the only connection is that they know how Putin, managed to turn Russia into a kleptocracy, and they know how he managed to suck every single ruble out of the treasury in Russia and leave everybody else with nothing on their shelves, no food, no peanut butter, no nothing, then that's enough of a connection for me.
Me too.
There you go. I don't need any more than that. If there is more, then we get to get rid of all of them. But if there isn't any more, just know that they're looking to steal the rest of the money. The Social Security Trust Fund, big money. Medicaid, Medicare, big money.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience. Visit randyrhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about President Teddy Roosevelt's fight to keep football a legal sport and his one simple suggestion. With football growing in brutality and violence long before professional football began, American voters were calling for the sport to be banned. President Roosevelt had tried to encourage safety measures to improve the game, but to no avail. Once again, he called college coaches and leaders together, this time to the White House. And this time they formed an intercollegiate conference that eventually became the NCAA and approved rules changes for the 1906 season. They created a neutral zone between the offense and defense, doubled the first down distance, and abolished mass formations. The president also suggested spreading the players out by legalizing the forward pass. They did that, and it completely changed the game into the sport we know today. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Man, I love herky jerky. It is just the best jerky you'll ever put in your mouth. They are the best purveyors of jerky I have ever found, but you have to go online at herkyjerky.com to sample and try this amazing big protein, big flavor, big packs, little carbs snack. Now, you know, the bacon is incredible. It's just a big slab. You put it on BLTs, you use it in salads, munch it right out of the bag. I've shopped for jerky everywhere, from supermarkets to gourmet jerky shops, but herky jerky is the best. And this is not a 3-ounce frou-frou bag. These are big, beautiful, nearly 1-pound bags of fresh, delicious, perfectly spiced jerky that bites and chews like homemade jerky should. Now, for the month of March, all the Randy listeners will get a surprise. If you order 2 packs or more of anything, they'll send you a sample pack of maybe elk, maybe venison, maybe buffalo. It could be anything, but it will be a surprise. All you need to do is type in the comments section, buy a stinking podcast. herkyjerky.com.
I am super sexually satisfied. I'm genuinely 100% more satisfied with my sex life than I was before Randi Rhodes came back on the air. Hi, I'm the Howard, and yes, it's true. I'm actually 100% more sexually satisfied than I was just one day ago. And I didn't grow a mustache. I didn't get an awesome new tattoo, and I didn't join a CrossFit gym either. I just bought a Randi Rhodes Air Force t-shirt. And when I did, I told Randy, well, there, I've done my part. How do I look in my awesome new Randi Rhodes Air Force 100% super soft cotton tee? And Randy said, that's it? That's all you did to support this unfreaking, unbelievably hard effort? Okay, Howard, go fuck yourself. So I did. And I have to tell you, I still got it. Get your super soft Randi Rhodes t-shirt at randyrhodes.com. Just click on podcasts and swag and order yours today. You'll feel a lot better after you tell Randy.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force. The Randi Rhodes Show is live on randyrhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or progressivevoices.com now.
All right, everybody, get out the Jamesons. Get it out. When you pour the Guinness, make sure it has a nice foamy head. It's all about the head tonight. Yeah. So yesterday, when we hit the air, there was this press conference underway, and there was like 6 minutes of the most bizarre dog and pony show that you've ever seen from the White House podium in the history of the United States of America. I mean, this guy, Sean Spicer, has taken some omerta, some blood oath to this president. I don't know if he has pictures of him with a live boy or a dead goat. Oh, my God. Listen to this.
Confident that the House and Senate Intelligence Committees would ultimately vindicate the president's allegation that Trump Tower was wiretapped. As I'm sure you have now seen, the Senate Intelligence Committee has said they see no indications Trump Tower was the subject of surveillance. That seems to be a pretty blanket statement. What's your reaction?
Well, I think there's several things. I would also, it's interesting to me that, you know, just as a point of interest, that when one entity says one thing that claims one thing, you guys cover it ad nauseum. When Devin Nunes came out and said, I think it's very possible yesterday, there was crickets from you guys. When Devin Nunes came out
Because
and
he
said there
didn't
was
say
no
that.
connection that he saw to Russia, crickets. When Tom Cotton said the same, you don't want to cover the stuff. No, hold on.
No evidence
No,
of wiretapping at Trump Tower.
this-
So now you've had the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate
No,
Intelligence Committee.
actually, here's his quote, Jonathan. No, here's the direct quote. I think it's very possible, end quote. That's what he said when he said the president's communications could have been swept up in collection. So again, I
saw no indication of wiretapping.
I understand that,
no
and
evidence of
and I think
wiretapping.
the president's been very clear when he talked about this, and he talked about it last night. When we talked
So
about
sick.
wiretapping, he meant surveillance, and that there have been incidents that have occurred. Devin Nunes couldn't have stated it more beautifully, but you choose not to cover that part. You chose not to cover when Tom Cotton went out, when Richard Burr went out, when others, Chairman Nunes and others, and said that there was no. Hold on. I understand that, Jonathan. And where was your passion and where was your concern when they all said that there was no connection to Russia? Where was it then? You crickets from you guys, because at the end of the day, when hold on. I'm making a point. The point is this: number one, that it's interesting how when evidence comes out and people who have been briefed on the Russia connection come out and say that there was nothing that they have seen that proves a connection, you choose not to cover that. You don't stop the narrative.
We've
you
played
continue to
Clapper
perpetuate
and
a false
Hayden
narrative.
over and
when
over
he came
again.
out yesterday and said, "quote I see no evidence that this happened," when he said, "quote I think it's very possible, but like I said, we should know later." You don't cover that part. You only cover the part that this is. But let's go through what we do know, okay? Yeah. Hold on. Let me, and I'm trying to answer your question, Jonathan, if you can calm down. If you look at what the New York Times reported on January 12th, 2017, they said, quote, in its final days, the Obama administration has expanded the power of the National Security Agency to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intelligence agencies before applying privacy protections.
Right, but what does that have to do with Trump?
The new rules significantly relax long-standing limits on what the NSA may do with the information gathered by its most powerful surveillance operation, which are largely unregulated by wiretapping laws. When Sarah Carter reported that by the start of the new year brought with it unexpected politicizing of the intelligence gathered in secret. Separately, the Obama administration amended a long-standing executive order allowing information intercepted through FISA warrants or by the National Security Agency to be shared by a wider audience in 16 government agencies as
Right, but there was no warrant, FISA or otherwise, or criminal or FBI warrant against Donald Trump.
Obama was leaving offices. Intelligence normally reserved for just a handful of intelligence leaders was spread throughout briefings to scores of workers. And soon leaks began appearing in news media organizations, often in stories lacking context of how national security investigations are actually concluded. On March 3rd, Fox News chief anchor Brett Baer said the following, quote, there's a report in June 2016, a FISA request by the Obama administration forwarded intelligence surveillance court to monitor communications involving Donald Trump.
He's quoting
and several other
Breitbart.
campaign officials. Then they got turned down, then in October. Then they renewed it and do a startup wiretap at Trump Tower with some computer and Russian banks. Baer continues. A June FISA request that foreign intelligence surveillance courts get shot down. A judge says, Jonathan, you can ask, you can follow up.
This is bizarre.
A judge says no go to monitoring Trump Tower. They go back in October. They do get a FISA granted. This is wiretap going on in a monitoring of computers that is sometimes they believe to a Russian counts. By all accounts, they don't come up with anything in the investigation, but the investigation continues and we don't know it. On November 11th, 2016, days after the election, Heat Street reported, quote,
Heat Street, also Rupert Murdoch.
The counterintelligence community had confirmed to Heat Street that the FBI sought and was granted a FISA warrant in October, giving counter-surveillance intelligence permission to examine the activities of U.S. persons in Donald Trump's campaign with ties to Russia. The first request, which sources say named Trump, was denied back in June, but the second was drawn more narrowly and granted in October after evidence was presented of a server, possibly related to the Trump campaign and its alleged links to two banks, SVB Bank and Russia's Alpha Bank. Sources suggest that a FISA warrant was granted to look at the full context of related documents that concern U.S. person. Two separate sources with links to the counterintelligence community have confirmed that the FBI sought and was granted a FISA warrant in October, giving counterintelligence permission to examine the activity of U.S. persons in Donald Trump's campaign with ties to Russia. They go on.
This is sick.
The FISA warrant was granted in connection with the investigation of suspected activity.
He's reading the entire Rupert Murdoch Heat Street article, and then prior to that, he was quoting Brett Baer, who was asking a question to Paul Ryan while he was reading Paul Ryan a Breitbart article. This is the sickest. In my life, I've never seen anything quite like this, really, truly. But I will say that, the intelligence communities have come out and they have said, the intelligence committees have come out and they have said there was no warrant, there was no FISA warrant, there was no wiretapping of Donald Trump, there was no surveillance. Yesterday, that was a pretty blanket statement because he changed from they tapped my phones to, there's many ways to surveil when he was sitting there talking to Tucker Carlson. And so the intelligence committees, which are both headed by Republicans, Burr in the Senate and Nunes, who he's saying, oh no, Nunes says it could have happened. No, they both came out yesterday and both of them said it didn't happen. It just didn't. There's no evidence whatsoever. And he stands at the podium and he starts reading these fringe media sites like some caller into a talk show. This is what I'm telling you. I am telling you that for the first time, the mainstream media or the legitimate media, the journalists in our country, the real ones who, work on Capitol Hill and cover Congress and cover the budget and cover the health care bill and interview, heads of state and do everything that they can, to bring you the news. They are now having their talk radio moment. We now have a president who listens to talk radio, who listens to Mark Levin, who listens to Rush Limbaugh, who listens to Alex freaking drunk-ass Jones, and to Roger Stone, who goes on that show saying he was poisoned by polonium and some Russian operatives trying to kill him and hit him with his car, and they were it's the deep state, they're coming after him. It's just the most amazing thing that finally they have to deal with the crap that I have to deal with. But it's sad and sick that it's happening at the highest levels of our government. I have never in my life heard of something like this.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Tonight, we know the President of the United States has no facts to back up his startling allegation that the former President of the United States, President Obama, wiretapped him at Trump Tower during the campaign. Keeping him honest, we know this tonight because bipartisan members of the Senate Intelligence Committee say they've seen no evidence that President Obama ordered Donald Trump's phones tapped during the campaign. We know this because House Speaker Paul Ryan also says he's seen no evidence. Now, remember, the president asked Congress to investigate, and the House and Senate Intelligence Committees have been doing just that for the last dozen days. We know the president has no facts to back up his early morning Saturday tweet storm because in today's White House briefing, Press Secretary Sean Spicer read a long list of media reports that he seemed to believe back up the president's claims. Media reports. Sean Hannity, Judge Napolitano, Heat Street, the New York Times, the very paper the President of the United States has consistently referred to as failing and fake.
Sean Hannity went on Fox to say Judge Andrew Napolitano made the following statement. On November 11th, 2016, days after the election, Heat Street reported. January 19th, the New York Times reported.
Well, the president has no facts because he himself was on Fox News last night and finally explained where he got the alleged information that led him to tweet the unsubstantiated allegations against the former president. Watch.
I've been reading about things. I read I think it was January 20th, a New York Times article where they were talking about wiretapping. There was an article, I think they used that exact term. I read other things. I watched your friend Brett Baer the day previous where he was talking about certain very complex sets of things happening and wiretapping. I said, wait a minute, there's a lot of wiretapping being talked about. I've been seeing a lot of things.
The president on Fox last night, he's been seeing a lot of things, he says. He read a report in the New York Times. He heard Brett Baer say something. A lot of wiretapping being talked about, he says there. Now we know. The thing is, the report in the New York Times the president seems to be talking about, it does not say anything about President Obama ordering a wiretap.
No.
We've actually interviewed the New York Times reporter who wrote the article, and we're going to do it again tonight. In a minute, you can hear him for yourself. As for Brett Baer, whose work I certainly respect, based on Sean Spicer's comments today, we believe the president is referring to Brett's show on March 3rd, the night before the president tweeted. That show does not cite any evidence of wiretapping. Instead, it appears to refer to other unspecified reports, none of which, again, say anything about former President Obama wiretapping President Trump.
So sick. And it was Breitbart that he was reading, that Bret Baier was reading to Paul Ryan, and Paul Ryan said, I have no evidence at all. And so after Paul Ryan says, I have no evidence at all, and I've been briefed, and there's nothing that would show that a FISA warrant was issued, or that the president was wiretapped, or that Barack Obama ordered it, or any of those things. I have no evidence whatsoever. I swear to God, one of the right-wing websites put it up and said, watch this all the way to the end, and you'll see that Paul Ryan, with a wink and a nod, is saying, Obama wiretapped President Trump. So I'm sitting there like an idiot going, oh, I got to see what the listeners are, what the crazy people that call me are. I listen to the whole freaking thing, and he never says it. They just put it in a headline. And then they put up a video that does not support what they said in the head. It is such a bizarre landscape, I can't even tell you. And now we have big issues. We got big fish to fry. The president has put out a budget that clearly indicates he doesn't give a rat's ass about people who are less than rich. Okay? He doesn't care about people who work and can't afford health insurance without subsidies. He doesn't give a rat's ass about people who work and make $12 an hour and can't afford health insurance even with a subsidy, so they qualify for Medicaid, the working poor. He doesn't give a damn about the environment. He doesn't give a damn about clean water. He doesn't give a damn about the Appalachians. Oh, the coal country people, okay? He doesn't give a damn because there's not one nickel in his budget that would help them get broadband to their rural neighborhoods. There's not one dime to clean up the coal slurry that's in their water. There's not a nickel for cross-educating coal miners into entrepreneurial skills or business skills or anything else. And as long as that's the case, and people in North Carolina know this is true, because when, believe it or not, the very flawed Bill Clinton presidency, and it was flawed. He was a deregulator too, and screwed up my business so bad that it was unrecognizable just about 5 years after he deregulated it. We used to have 100,000 jobs or more for people like me in this country. 100,000, and they could talk locally to you. They could tell you everything about your legislature and your local, issues. That's all gone now. That's all gone because you've got like 3 major corporations, and they're all conservative, running all of talk radio, which is why you're going to hear Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity on 3 freaking radio stations in a tiny little town. How is that possible? Who would need to hear all those shows on 3 different radio stations? It's just to block out any truth. Don't you get it? So I'm not a big fan of the deregulating Bill Clinton era. However, he understood that people were going to have to modernize their education in order to compete in the 20th and 21st century that was about to dawn. And people were able to, and then all of a sudden Bank of America took a look at North Carolina and said, these are some educated people. They have learned business. We're going to open up Bank of America. And the entire state grew because people could work at high-paying jobs. That is not going to happen under this president. There will be no investment whatsoever.
All things Randy at randyrhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randy Rhodes Show.
Hey, Trump is in the White House. Gold. Yes, gold. It really has the opportunity to do super well. That's definitely one good reason to own it. But did you know that there are a lot of benefits to owning gold? When you have gold in your physical possession, it provides safety. It's a hedge against inflation, U.S. dollar turmoil, and presidential instability. Gold has so much historical precedence as real money that the central banks that run the global financial system buy gold in staggering quantities year after year. Many financial service providers agree that gold is a great diversification tool for everyone's portfolio. If you want to learn more about the benefits of owning gold, just call my friends at ITM Trading at 1-888-OWN-GOLD. Whether you want to own physical gold in your possession or put some in your IRA, call ITM today at 1-888-OWN-GOLD. ITM specializes in all types of gold and silver coins and bars. Call ITM Trading. Get your free gold kit at 1-888-OWN-GOLD. 1-888-OWN-GOLD.
Hi, Truth Seekers. It's Kathy Malloy. Did you know Mike is finally writing a book?
It's something near and dear to my heart, and that is hate mail. Oh, dear God. I'm telling you, the hate mail that I've gotten over the years. And I love getting it because I guess it reinforces my belief that sometimes I think is a little bit arrogant on my part until I get the hate mail, and that is that so many people out there are just dumb, you know? I mean, just totally incapable of writing a good insult, totally incapable of spelling, and it's great fun to read. It really is. We've got boxes and boxes of hate mail that people have sent. Snail mail, email, postcards. I don't think I really started getting the hateful hate mail until I've been on the air for about 4 or 5 years. Now, the book will already include a solid collection of hate mail, but there's a bunch that is just too stupid, too funny, too strange, too vicious, or downright bizarre to include in the book, but I still want to share it with you. Kathy was in the attic today going through box after box after box of, and it's colder than hell down here today in Atlanta, Georgia, but she was up there in the cold just going through these boxes. I mean, we have, 3, 4, 5 huge boxes of mail. I'm not talking about an email facsimile. We're talking about the real damn thing. If you want to own an original piece of some of the most asinine hate mail ever written, we have it for you. And it'll be signed by me. This is your chance. We're adding a limited number of these to the rewards, so if you want me to send you some hate mail, make your move. I saw one today. It really cracked me up because it was 25 years after we got our asses kicked out of Vietnam. And the guy that wrote it to me called me Hanoi Malloy. Hanoi Malloy, like, Jesus Christ, dude. I mean, that was forever ago. Now, let me add one more thing. We've gotten some questions about how you can get more than one copy of the book, whether, you want to give it to your friends or family, or maybe use it as a doorstop, keep the window open in the fall to let the cool breeze in, whatever. We want to make that easy for you. All you have to do is add $25 to your total amount per additional copy. Now, what does that mean? If they've already contributed $50,
let's say you purchased a $100 book level, and you want to get 3 more. Well, then you would just go back in and amend your original contribution another $75. So it would be $175, and you'll get the $100 package and 3, and then a total of 4 copies of the book. You see? Does that make sense? So for every $25 you add, and you can go back into Kickstarter and change your contribution at any time. Join Mike live, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West. If you can't listen live, download our podcast. And don't forget to reserve your copy of the book today. Click on the green Kickstarter icon at the top of the page.
All things Randy at randyrhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randy Rhodes Show.
All right, 46 after on St. Patrick's Day. Pour a nice foamy Guinness. Get a good head. Manny in Massachusetts, hello.
Hello. I just want to update some people here. I hear that the leader of the free world met with Donald Trump today. That's Angela Merkel.
Yes.
And I also want to let
yes, she did.
People, I also want to let people know that most of these government workers that are going to get laid off, a lot of them are vets because they get to the front of the line when they're applying for jobs because they're vets. Another thing, if you want to look up,
you know what's so interesting is that when FDR was facing, the Great Depression, what did he do? He decided to increase, work programs. So he decided he would build electric grids. He decided he would build sewerways. He decided he would put manhole covers. He decided he would do intake lines. And we had the WPA. We had all these works projects. And this is what brings people back into the economy. They're not firing hundreds of thousands of government workers. I mean, that makes no sense.
You could either give somebody a job or you could give them welfare. Which one you want to do?
Which one you want to do, exactly.
And as far as privatizing the armed forces, Google Fat Leonard.
Oh, I've seen.
There's a lot that's going to be coming down with that.
Oh my God! Yes, everybody. Yeah. I think it's in yesterday's homework section. Is Fat Leonard? There's a section on what Fat Leonard is in the Navy. You won't even believe it. And all these people that you're forced to salute, or that you think you ought to thank for their service, these admirals, these rear admirals, they are the dirtiest players in the whole system. It's just an amazing phenomenon.
And another thing, the money for the schools. I remember when I was young, I used to always want to go to school early so I could get my meal because I hated to sit in class with my stomach rumbling. And I couldn't even learn anything when I was just thinking about food the whole time. I grew up in a poor neighborhood.
Yeah.
Very, very poor neighborhood. And also, it also helped me stay out of gangs because my mother worked 2 jobs. My father was never around. And so if I got home, my mother wouldn't be there. So the after-school program kept me more entertained and kept me off the street.
What do you do now?
It stopped. Right now, I do out of body. I picked up a trade.
Okay, so
I've been doing it since I was in middle school.
So after-school programs helped you graduate. They helped you, assimilate into, an economy. Taught you a skill. Kept you off the street. Let's slash that, Manny, because that sucks. That's a terrible result.
But let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If they pass this tax break, which they call a health care bill,
right?
And let's just say they pass this budget, do you think Trump supporters are still going to be supporting Trump? Or?
I was talking about that last night. We all went out to dinner. My mom, Loretta, was there, and my friends Karen and Steve, and they're the ones that we watched the returns with, the election, and Karen was just crying on the couch, going, "Randy, do something, do something." And Howard's sister and me and Howard, obviously, and we all went out to dinner. And privately, we're all talking about what we think is going to happen, amongst the Trump pansies, And I think we all came to an agreement that some angry Trump pansy who's going to realize they were betrayed by this man that they gave, like a blood oath, they swore a blood oath to him, are going to turn on him in a very vicious way.
Yeah, because I feel like we need to feel the pain before they realize they screwed up.
I know it's got to affect them, but the sad part is they don't know how they got the help that they got in the first place. And when it goes away, they'll probably, be able to, Trump will tell them who to blame, and they might just do it. Or they might just smarten up after all this time and say, you know what, he was full of crap and, something's got to be done. But I don't know. I mean, it remains to be seen, but we were talking about it last night. It's interesting. And, I was, kind of commenting on how, Sadat was killed by, an Egyptian and, in Israel, same thing, by a right wing, it's always, the very radical right that seems to, want to avenge the person that betrayed them. The rest of us, we all want, we'll re-legislate it. We'll redo it, But they always want their pound of flesh. So I don't know. I mean, they're very hostile. They're extremely rude. They're very, they're very undereducated. They don't read a newspaper. They watch and read fake news if they read anything. And it's a tough, slog to get them to understand the world around them and how Trump's budget is a clear signal to them that they were duped. So I don't know. I don't know how much it's going to take before they actually say enough. This guy's got to go. But we'll see. Thanks, Manny. Mary in Lexington, Kentucky.
Oh, hola, Randy. Pura vida.
Pura vida.
I lived in Costa Rica for 12 years back in the 70s. My father was retired military, 25 years. But I'm calling in to tell you how much I appreciate your show. I support you. And thank God that we have someone who's willing to speak truth to power and inform the people of this country, because I live in Lexington, and I am just so upset over the cuts that are being proposed. And I just hope and pray that it doesn't get passed, because people are going to suffer. And I've suffered. I was homeless, and I was given a Section 8. First of all, Medicaid saved my life. And I got out of homelessness. I was issued a Section 8. I have received LIHEAP assistance in the past. Mm-hmm. People on Section 8, if they don't pay their utility bills...
You mean housing. You mean Section 8 housing, not military discharge.
A Section 8 voucher. Yes,
right.
housing.
Well, because some people are thinking you were discharged, from the military.
Oh, no, right. No. My father was in the military.
Yeah, I know.
But okay.
Yeah.
But people who rely on LIHEAP, who have Section 8 voucher housing, if they don't maintain their electric bill, their utility bills, they get evicted.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see a rash. I agree with you 100%. We're going to see a rash of homelessness.
Oh, absolutely.
In this country like we've never seen, if this gets passed.
Yeah, well, look, this is Reagan's budget. It was so interesting when I was reading it. All these little dings were going off in my head going, where have I seen this before? Where have I seen it? It's Ronald Reagan's budget. And Ronald Reagan's budget is easily, looked up, and you can see what the effects of it were. And it was an increase in homelessness, a decrease in mental health care, an increase in violence, an increase in, listen, Reagan was only president for 2 months when Hinckley, who suffered from schizophrenia, shot him. And you would think that Reagan would start to understand mental illness and addiction and the availability of guns, and he would have. No, he ignored all of it. He just kept on going and going and going, and it's so interesting because two sons of one of the guys close to Reagan, there was a guy named Roy Miller who was Ronald Reagan's personal tax advisor. Okay, he wasn't in the government, but Roy Miller also had two sons. And these two sons, they both suffered from schizophrenia. One committed suicide in 1981, and the other one ended up killing his own mother in 1988. And despite the fact that Ronald Reagan was exposed to mental illness, that he was shot by somebody with schizophrenia, that his friend and tax advisor had two sons that one killed the mother and the other one, took his own life. He never exhibited any interest in doing anything about, PTSD, mentally ill, drug addiction, violence, nothing. And we had this massive increase in violence, this massive increase in homelessness, all because the budget that Ronald Reagan put forward looks exactly like the Trump budget.
Yeah.
I mean,
I also wanted to point out the fact that Mitch McConnell, when he was running for re-election here in Kentucky, he promised the people that if they liked to connect, they could keep connect. I can do some research and share that with you, but it's just surprising to me that no one has brought up that Mitch McConnell campaigned on that. And he never made it clear to people that connect was Obamacare. Never.
I know. Even Governor Beshear, who I think did the right thing, obviously, and I have a lot of respect for what he did. When he was running in Kentucky, he ran against Obamacare. He was a Democrat, but he ran against Obamacare. And then once he was elected, he looked around his state and he said, you know what, this is working, and I'm going to expand Medicaid. And he did, and it turned out great, but he had to change the name because Obamacare was made so unpopular by him. And Mitch McConnell and the Republicans that surround your state, that they changed the name to Connect. I've told this story a million times. So now, this is when I say people in rural places, not necessarily Lexington or Nashville, or Tennessee, where he went the other day. Those are cities and people are a little more hip. But people in rural places don't know how they got the help that they get. They think it's something other than Obamacare, and it's not.
Yes. And I moved from North Florida up to Kentucky, up to Lexington a year and a half ago. I'm originally from Northeast Florida, and people there are going to realize, too, how much they're going to lose. There's a lot of poverty in that area as well.
No, I know.
And that they vote strictly. The I-4 corridor, I mean, you saw Trump down in Daytona. My sister went down there with my brother-in-law to see Hillary when she was campaigning, and they were harassed. I mean, it's just. I'm out of words.
I understand.
I wanted to call and tell you hello and how much I appreciate you. And I did live in Costa Rica for 12 years. I raised my daughter there, and I became homeless because I was sick and ill, unable to work.
Oh.
And
so
did not have the money or the insurance to get the medical evidence that I needed in order to get my disability. So thank God for Medicaid.
Yeah, I hear you, but check this out. So it looks like the compromise that the Republicans wanted from Donald Trump says that if you get Medicaid, you have to work, or else you don't qualify for Medicaid.
Right. Well, here in Kentucky, Bevin wants to adopt Pence's program in Indiana, where people who receive Medicaid, they have to volunteer, or they have to work, or if you stay home and take care of an ill family member, that also counts towards so many hours of service.
Well, I will tell you, you know, most of the people that get Medicaid do work, but they only make less than $15 an hour, and they can't afford health care, and they do fall under that $24,000 a year threshold, and they qualify for Medicaid. However, there are some people who are legitimately disabled, which is what reminded me to tell you this, who can't work but couldn't prove that they qualified for disability insurance under Social Security, and their Medicaid is now about to go away.
Yeah, it's shocking.
It's bizarre.
It's shocking.
It's bizarre.
And it just, you know, my mother in Florida was on a 6-month waiting list for Meals on Wheels. She has dementia. And my family did our best to take care of her, but it got to the point where it was no longer safe for her to live at her apartment.
Right.
And now she's in an assisted living place, and she does have her Social Security along with Medicaid helps pay for that.
Right. Medicaid is what pays for nursing home care. And without Medicaid, your parents that you love so much, who are unable to be on their own at all for any minute of any day because they're blind or because they're in the end stages of Alzheimer's, all the care that they get now, you take the Medicaid away, they get thrown out of those assisted living centers. They get thrown out of the nursing homes. I imagine the private nursing homes are going to lobby against this, but we'll have to wait and see. Happy St. Paddy's Day!
I think the mainstream media is being redefined in this Trump era because it's becoming more adversarial. It's understanding that objectivity doesn't work. Truth, rigor, verifiable data, always needed. But one thing that we still miss in the, quote, mainstream, which I think the nation provides, is giving voice to those who are voiceless, a home for dissenters, for activists, coverage of movements in a real, genuine, deep way. And I think, you know, that the mainstream, and I'll stop here, continues to police the parameters of what's possible in our society and politics. What do I mean by that? Sort of tells us what's viable. And what's viable doesn't fully engage with the full range we could explore as a country if we had a politics and a media that didn't traffic in what I call the kind of politics of downsized, excluded alternatives.
You wrote a column actually a few weeks back, and it's one of the only sets of coverage that I've seen looking at what is effectively a quiet war on net neutrality playing out at the FCC, and really with very little sunlight actually shining on it. Tell me a little bit about what is net neutrality, why is it important, and how is it at risk and being undermined as we speak?
So let me just step back and say that over the years, the nation, particularly John Nichols, our national affairs correspondent, has done an enormous amount on the role of the FCC in media politics in this country. In fact, John and his colleague Robert McChesney's work helped create Free Press, which your listeners should check out, a great media democracy reform consumer advocacy group. But net neutrality, the principle that all Internet traffic should be treated equally, that there not be a fast lane with those for more money, that there be a level playing field where good ideas can prosper no matter who or where they come from. And great former FCC Commissioner Michael Copps has argued that net neutrality is a civil rights issue. He's right. I mean, it's an open and free Internet plays in our civic dialogue. The new head of the FCC, who comes out of Verizon, he was an associate general counsel at Verizon, has quite quickly started to dismantle some of the rules of the road which were put in place under the Obama administration as a result of a lot of grassroots activism. So, you know, if we begin to dismantle net neutrality and end the reclassification of the Internet as a public utility, which happened in 2015, we're going